illicit actions. We now have in this country what is a runaway investigation. It's spinning out of control. It's led by Mueller and his merry band of Trump-hating deep state sycophants. That's just a fact. Now, we have gone from the prosecution of Paul Manafort over years-old payments from Ukraine, not Russia, to now an investigation into alleged affairs between Trump and a porn star named Stormy Daniels. You can't make this up. And now today we're learning from reports that FBI agents during the Cohn raid, they're actually looking for information about payments made to a former Playboy playmate, Karen McDougal. Does anyone actually believe that a porn star and a former Playboy playmate, that they're going to shed any light on potential collusion with Russia? The answer is of course not. Robert Mueller is now officially gone rogue and declared war against the president. And big news tonight, according to reports, Stormy Daniels, CNN will be so proud. They're now cooperating with Robert Mueller in his probe. Now, of course, this rogue activity from Mueller, it's nothing new. Remember back in March, former Trump political advisor Sam Nunberg, he said Mueller was seeking information regarding Michael Cohen's payments, yep, you got it, to Stormy Daniels. So much for Russian interference.
Did Mueller's folks ask anything that related to these issues around payments to people or women?
Well, look, they asked if I had ever heard anything about that, and my answer is I never have. I don't know anything about it, and I wouldn't have known anything about it.
All right, so sadly, tonight what's happening is Mueller's runaway train of an investigation is something we have now been warning you about for over a year. I've told you there are 5 forces actively working against Donald Trump. They have from the beginning. It is your corrupt media, the corrupt Democratic Party that doesn't care about the American people, weak establishment Republicans, never Trumpers. They want to be proven right, and what we describe as the deep state. And tonight you have 2 of those 5 forces working together to malign the president you elected. Now, we did some digging today, and what did we find? There's a lot of reports you've been hearing about the inner workings of the Mueller investigation. They include a lot of anonymous sources. In fact, some of these reports are totally based on anonymous sourcing. So who are all these anonymous people feeding all this information to their friends in the liberal media? Now, could it be that Mueller's team is actually coordinating with the liberal media, these outlets, to turn public opinion against President Trump? That helps their case. Now, maybe Mueller's office and their emails, maybe they'll get raided in pre-dawn hours. Maybe we'll see that happen. Now, clearly, the corrupt media and Mueller, knowing there's no collusion, there's no evidence of collusion. If they had it, we would know it by now. They're hoping that President Trump actually fires Mueller. And without a doubt, like Sarah Sanders said today, the president does have actually the legal right to fire Mueller. But we know if the president does, imagine the political outcry, what it would be like. It would be massive. In fact, this is likely exactly what many in these 5 forces I talk about want, because they believe it would spark, the humiliating end of the Trump presidency that we, the people, voted for. After all, that's been their goal from the get-go. We've always known that. And in their minds, this would set President Trump up to be impeached. And the sad truth tonight is while Mueller is on this witch hunt fishing expedition, it is abundantly clear that if Trump fires Mueller, sadly, nothing will go away. The truth is it'll only get worse. It'll only get louder. We'll only become more divided. Nothing will get done in the country. It doesn't matter, it appears, how rogue Robert Mueller is. Doesn't matter what he did with Whitey Bulger in Boston and 4 innocent people that went to jail. 2 died in jail because an FBI informant in his office that was working with Mueller and his team. And then after 2 died, there was over $100 million paid out in that case. It doesn't seem to matter to anybody in the liberal media that Mueller's pit bull, as described by the New York Times, Andrew Weissman, that he was involved in tens of thousands of people losing their jobs, their careers at Arthur Andersen Accounting. Doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter. The Supreme Court overturned Weissman, Mueller's pit bull, 9-0. How often does that happen? It doesn't matter that 4 Merrill executives went to jail for a year because of Weissman and that the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned their convictions. And it doesn't seem to matter that courts have excoriated Mueller's pit bull Weissman for withholding exculpatory evidence. And it doesn't matter that Mueller's team almost exclusively donated money to Obama, to Hillary, and to the DNC. After all, why would Robert Mueller hire a guy like Andrew Weissman with that atrocious track record? Why was he ever appointed? The answer is it was a fishing expedition, and it was an effort to get Trump from the beginning. A federal judge courageously standing up to this totally out of control witch hunt in what is the biggest or single biggest beatdown I have ever seen in my life by a judge during a federal court hearing over former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort's years-old conspiracy charges. This goes back 13 years. A U.S. district judge, his name is T.S. Ellis III, utterly rebukes the entire special counsel investigation and telling a member of Mueller's team, quote, "You don't really care about Mr. Manafort. You really care about information Mr. Manafort can give you to lead you to Mr. Trump and an impeachment or whatever." And according to a Fox News producer that was in the courtroom, the judge went on to say, "You want Manafort to sing." And Judge Ellis also slamming the scope of Robert Mueller's investigation, saying, "Oh, we don't want anyone with unfettered power." And the judge even mocked the special counsel, saying, quote, "We said this was what the investigation was about, but we're not bound by it, and we were lying." A federal judge just confirmed everything we have been saying on the show for months. There is nothing Mueller will not do to malign this president, everyone around him. It's always been about Trump, not any of these other people. Now, during a speech the president was giving at the NRA, he reacted to Judge Ellis's stunning reprimand and beatdown of Team Mueller. Take a look.
None of that information has to do with information related to the Russian government coordination and the campaign of Donald Trump. It doesn't have anything to do. It's from years before. Then, how does this have anything to do with the campaign, the judge asked. Let me tell you, folks, we're all fighting battles, but I love fighting these battles. It's really a disgrace. What's happening to our country is a disgrace.
Yeah, it's a battle over the rule of law, equal justice under the law, equal application under the law. It's a battle over the Constitution. And according to our producer inside the courtroom, Judge Ellis also raised important questions over why Rod Rosenstein has not recused himself from this Russia investigation. Now, this comes after the Deputy Attorney General shot down a request from members of the Freedom Caucus to review the unredacted memo that now details why the FBI's investigation into collusion started in the first place. By the way, hand them over. It's important to note this memo, which outlines the scope of the Russia investigation, it was written in May, 3 months before Mueller was appointed. And this is just one more example of obstruction of justice from the Justice Department, which is actively preventing members of Congress from conducting important investigations, their role, co-equal branches of government, over the Russia probe, FISA abuse, and so much more. It's called checks and balances, co-equal branches. And Rosenstein and the FBI and the Justice Department, they are not impervious to the rule of law. And it's time for Rosenstein and others to resign and for this witch hunt to end. In our opening monologues, we've also covered James Comey's highly publicized book tour. I even extended an invitation to James Comey to come on this show. We're still waiting. Take a look. We have predicted for months the disgraced former FBI director, Jim Comey, he's prepared to cash in on his newfound fame. I did predict that. In just a few weeks, Comey's going to kick off his whirlwind book tour. He's got tough interviews with Stephen Colbert, Clinton sycophant George Stephanopoulos, and a cozy sit-down with the ladies of The View. And according to a new report from Axios, Comey's planning to, quote, come out hot and correct all the so-called lies about him and the FBI. For months, we have literally been bringing you, the American people, on a nightly basis, breaking news, hard-hitting investigative reports about the corruption at some of the highest levels of our government, including the shocking details about the abuse of power at the very top of the FBI. Now, James Comey, you want to come out hot? You want to answer hard, important questions? You're welcome on this program. Tonight, I am officially opening up an invitation to Jim Comey. You want to sell your book? Come on the show. We'll give you a full hour. You name a day, we'll make it work. We'll work with your schedule. I'll give you 3 hours on my nationally syndicated radio show, which, by the way, is on 575 radio stations around America, so everybody can hear from you. And we'll ask you the tough questions, the ones that Stephen Colbert might miss. For example, did you, in fact, tell a closed session of Congress that you believe Michael Flynn did not lie to the FBI? Did you think he's being unfairly prosecuted? Why did you draft a letter exonerating Hillary Clinton of charges in the email investigation months before she was interviewed by the FBI and 17 other important people? And will you explain the lies and the omissions to the FISA court? And why did you tell Trump that the dossier was unverified and salacious 3 months after you allowed the same dossier to be presented to the FISA court when you didn't tell the FISA court Hillary bought and paid for it, and you knew that? Why did you withhold the fact that Clinton paid for the dirty dossier? And how do you explain your unlawful leaking of classified information to the media after you were fired? You know, through that Columbia professor you wanted the special counsel? Jim Comey, if you're looking for fame and fortune, you want to sell books, by all means, have fun on The View. Have a great time. Yuck it up with Colbert. Hang out with George Stephanopoulos. Go get a beer afterwards. But if you really want to reach all Americans, defend your honor, if you really want to tell the truth, we've got a lot of questions for you. Come on this show. A full hour, 3 hours of radio. That's the best deal you're going to get. We'll lay out all the facts. We'll lay out all the evidence. We'll give you a chance to respond. And as we say here at Fox, well, we report. We'll let our audience decide if you're telling the truth. I've said many times, journalism in this country is dead, it is buried, and has been since, 2007. So instead of reporting facts, these so-called news outlets, they just literally push their own political narrative, all while hiding behind this, feigned moral outrage, this moral facade, and calling themselves journalists. So while the media and the mainstream media gets mad at it, I'm an opinion journalist host. By the way, frankly, we've broken more news on this program than they've broken in a year and a half. They just echo the same talking points every night. And they're totally happy to forget about all of the former FBI Director Comey's misdeeds, including leaking potentially classified privilege notes to the press to set up a special counsel, his potential weaponization of the FISA court system, the special treatment he gave Hillary Clinton, who we know committed felonies during that email investigation. He wrote the letter exonerating Clinton in May, before he interviewed her in July and 17 other key witnesses. And remember, when Comey lied about this very subject in front of Congress while under oath, he lied about it. We have him in his own words, and we have the videotape. As Warner Wolf says, let's go to the videotape.
Director, did you make the decision not to recommend criminal charges relating to classified information before or after Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI on July the 2nd?
After. But if colleagues of ours believe I am lying about when I made this decision, please urge them to contact me privately so we can have a conversation about this. All I can do is tell you again, the decision was made after that because I didn't know what was going to happen in that interview. She maybe lied during the interview in a way we could prove.
But just in case we wrote the exoneration months earlier and then, interview by Peter Strzok. Oh, that's right, the Trump-hating guy. Despite all of this, the mainstream media, their friends in the Democratic Party, they're currently treating Comey like the anti-Trump golden goose. I guess they forgot how much they actually hated him during the investigation of Hillary Clinton. Here's Comey's best friends today. Watch this.
Striking is the extent to which the FBI director of the United States is allowing himself to be interjected into this political campaign. Unprecedented.
James Comey is getting horrible advice. He is interfering in this election. I don't understand what the guy's doing.
He's got a big burden of proof, so to speak, on him for why he did what seems to be such an appalling act that goes against the tradition of prosecutors at every level of government. It was, when I heard about it, I found it hard to believe that Comey, who I thought had some degree of integrity, would do this.
It is conceivable that this was just a coincidence, but coming on top of the Director Comey's, very unusual and controversial release last week, it just makes the FBI look like a wing of the Republican Party.
I think he made a mistake on this, And he clearly has a double standard.
Whether or not Comey's intervention has affected the presidential race, it's clear that his disclosure and the spate of now competing, one might even say warring FBI leaks that have followed have raised serious questions about the FBI's integrity and impartiality.
I just tell you, the integrity of Comey as well as the FBI is in question. It makes you wonder.
We're all disturbed, first of all, by the letter, which really broke precedent, was over the advice of the leaders in the Justice Department. I'm not challenging Mr. Comey's motivation, but I do think it was unwarranted. It was a mistake.
I am so disappointed in Comey. He has let the country down for partisan purposes, and that's why I called him the new J. Edgar Hoover, because I believe that.
Do you believe that Jim Comey should resign, Senator Reid?
Of course, yes.
They hated him. Now the media is back in love with James Comey, and the montage that you just saw is just another piece of evidence proving facts do not matter to these people on the left, only ideology. And coming up on the special edition of Hannity, the long list of accomplishments the anti-Trump media will never tell you about. Please stay with us.
The historic town near Baltimore was the scene of a devastating flood yesterday that turned walkways into raging waterways. On Main Street, muddy water carried cars away and poured into homes and businesses. Emergency crews made dozens of rescues. Right now, one man remains missing. This comes as the town was rebuilding from a previous flood just 2 years ago. Former President George H.W. Bush is spending his Memorial Day in a Maine hospital where he's being treated for low blood pressure and fatigue. The 94-year-old Bush will likely remain there for a few days, but he is described as awake, alert, and not in any discomfort. I'm Alicia Cunha. Now back to Sean Hannity. For all your headlines, log on to foxnews.com.
Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. It's no secret that the liberal press has viciously attacked President Trump while completely ignoring his very long list of accomplishments. Now, I've highlighted many of the president's major successes in my opening monologues. Let's take a look. President Trump is on a complete tear by continuing to keep his promises and enact the agenda that you, the American people, voted for in November of 2016. The DHS Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, she made a major announcement earlier today about President Trump's plan to secure the southern border. Here's what she said.
The president has directed the National Guard personnel be deployed to the southern border. The Department of Defense, as you know, has long supported the efforts of DHS to protect our nation's borders. This includes ongoing counter-narcotic missions, infrastructure construction, persistent surveillance operations training, and aerial support throughout the Western Hemisphere. The Department of Defense is a longtime partner of the Department of Homeland Security, and I thank them for their support. While plans are being finalized, it's our expectation that the National Guard will deploy personnel in support of CBP's border security mission.
And tonight we have learned that President Trump has signed the proclamation to send the National Guard to the southern border. Now, the president, he deserves a lot of credit because if Congress, if they're not going to lift a finger to solve the problem, then he is going to take the steps as commander-in-chief and do it on his own, which he now has. Now, before the liberal media, all you leftists out there, start losing your collective minds over the National Guard being deployed at the southern border, with all due respect, we will educate you. There is already precedence for all of this. Both George W. Bush and Barack Obama, they actually did the exact same thing. And President Trump's tough rhetoric calling for Mexico to disband this caravan, as you see, of asylum seekers heading for the U.S. border, that's also working. Now, according to reports, more than 1,000-person caravan has now fallen apart. Leaders of the group are now saying they will no longer head for America's southern border. Now, this is the start of good news for the president. Look at this, a brand new Rasmussen poll. His approval rating is now 51%, which is higher than Barack Obama's. During the exact same time in his presidency, he was only at 46%, and he got reelected. But the liberal media probably won't be telling you that tonight. They're too busy orchestrating an onslaught of any negative story that they possibly can find, obsessing over, oh, Stormy Daniels and Trump-Russia collusion, Russia, that doesn't exist. Now, there's also a fake news CNN poll. This is pretty amazing. It shows President Trump making major gains with 4 key groups. He's gained 8 points with men since February, 5 points with younger voters, 9 points with middle-aged voters, and he's up by 10 points with college graduates. Now, here's what's so interesting about these polls. Just imagine if the president wasn't constantly under attack from a media that wants to destroy him. Imagine if Robert Mueller and his team of Democratic donors weren't carrying out their never-ending witch hunt. Don't you think the president's poll numbers would be a lot higher if a majority of the country wasn't being fed an endless stream of outright lies, propaganda, distortion, and misinformation? Now, despite all of that, President Trump, he's just rolling along doing his job every day, the job that you elected him to do. We do have some good news to bring you about the president. I guarantee you nobody else in the media will talk about it. And earlier today, the president actually in a speech in the Rose Garden was highlighting something the media will never talk about. It's not Russia and it's not Stormy. His accomplishments that are improving the lives of the American people, the forgotten men and women that voted in November of 2016.
We've created 3 million new jobs since the election. Unemployment claims are at their lowest level in nearly 50 years. Think of that. Something I'm very proud about. Unemployment rates for Hispanics and African Americans have reached the lowest levels ever recorded. Think of that. For women, the lowest levels in 19 years. So we have really good numbers. And something a lot of people didn't think was going to happen, wages are rising at the fastest pace in over a decade. We're cutting record numbers of regulations. We've cut more regulations in a year and a quarter than any administration, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or in one case, 16 years. We're also unleashing American energy and American energy independence. We're now an exporter of energy. We're doing 10 million barrels a day. Nobody thought they'd see this. We're cracking down on unfair trade deals. We're taking strong action to secure our border, stop illegal immigration, and restore the rule of law. And we've passed the biggest tax cut and reform in American history.
Make no mistake, in just over a year, the amount of accomplishments from this administration, this is historic. I've never seen the media talk about this. Finally tonight, we're going to end on some good news you'll never hear from anybody in the media. Despite what I describe as the 5 forces that have been working to defeat this president, one to prevent him from getting elected, then to delegitimize him and get him thrown out of office, you have the media, you have the never-Trumpers, you have weak establishment Republicans, you have Democrats, and, of course, the deep state. You know, the Trump agenda keeps seeing massive, major progress both right here and abroad. Now, this includes big progress on the economy. Look at this. 14 states, 14, have now hit record low unemployment numbers, including Alabama, Arkansas, Texas, Hawaii, even California, Wisconsin. Now, meanwhile, the U.S. is also seeing record low unemployment for African Americans and Hispanic Americans. A great day for this country and our fellow countrymen. Why? Because early this morning, a plane carrying 3 of our fellow Americans who had been held hostage in North Korea for months, they touched down in Joint Base Andrews. Our prayers were answered. These 3 men came back in good health, and we should all be proud of the outstanding work this country did to bring our fellow Americans home. President Trump, he met the 3 former hostages on the tarmac and delivered these hopeful remarks about 3 a.m. in the morning last night.
We want to thank Kim Jong-un, who really was excellent to these 3 incredible people. They are really 3 incredible people. And the fact that we were able to get them out so soon was really a tribute to a lot of things.
Now, this was a very important diplomatic victory. We know the danger that these 3 Americans faced because we saw what happened to Otto Warmbier. Remember, he was the American college student. He was held captive in North Korea, which ultimately caused his horrific death. And the Warmbier family, they remain in our prayers tonight. And tonight we have a reason to feel hopeful and proud 3 American lives were likely saved, and we didn't have to bribe Kim Jong-un or send pallets of cash to North Korea to get the job done. The president has continued to pile up one massive win after another, ahead, of course, of these all-important midterm elections in 2018 this year. Now, Trump now has an undeniable, amazing record of promises kept and accomplishments. And by the way, every Republican can now run on the things that he's done, and this can no longer be ignored. Now, today in Israel, the president kept a major campaign promise. Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, Steve Mnuchin, other top administration officials unveiled the new embassy in Israel's true capital. It's called Jerusalem. Now, the president emphasized the significance of this historic moment in a video message to the audience. Take a look.
Today, Jerusalem is the seat of Israel's government. It is the home of the Israeli legislature and the Israeli Supreme Court and Israel's prime minister and president. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Yet for many years we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem. On December 6, 2017, at my direction, the United States finally and officially recognized Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel. Today we follow through on this recognition and open our embassy in the historic and sacred land of Jerusalem. And we're opening it many, many years ahead of schedule.
And the Israeli prime minister, a man who I've said for many years has incredible moral clarity, Bibi Netanyahu, he also attended this monumental event. And President Trump, he talked about him keeping his word and his promises. Take a look.
Last December, President Trump became the first world leader to recognize Jerusalem as our capital. And today, the United States of America is opening its embassy right here in Jerusalem. Thank you, President Trump, for having the courage to keep your promises. Thank you, President Trump, and thank you all for making the alliance between America and Israel stronger than ever.
Now, there's a reason the prime minister and the Israelis are so thankful for President Trump's bold actions. You see, for decades, we've had one U.S. president after another promising over and over and over and over and over again that they were going to open an embassy in Jerusalem, but they never delivered. They repeatedly broke their promises. Now, what we continue to see over and over again is that what the president says he's going to do, he actually does. By the way, it's good politics, too. Keep your word. And up next on the special edition of Hannity, Democrats refuse to denounce one of the most hateful anti-Semitic people in America. Why? Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. On this program, we have investigated the Democrats and their ties to radical Nation of Islam leader, screwy Louis Farrakhan. Well, when are prominent Democrats, when will they denounce Farrakhan as one of the most hateful anti-Semitic people in America? We examine that and so much more in an opening monologue. We've been following a story that the Daily Caller broke earlier this week about 7 Democratic lawmakers having ties to Louis Farrakhan. Now, this list includes Representatives Maxine Waters, Keith Ellison, who's also the deputy co-chair of the DNC, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Danny Davis, Andre Carson, Gregory Meeks, and Al Green. Now, these alarming connections to Farrakhan are causing the Republican Jewish coalition, rightly, to call on these lawmakers to resign. Now, those members of Congress aren't the only liberals that have relationships with Farrakhan. We'll have more on that in just a second. Now, Tamika Mallory, she's the co-chair of the Women's March. She actually attended a recent Farrakhan event. It was called Savior's Day in Chicago, where he said these despicable things.
The powerful Jews are my enemies. White folks are going down. And Satan is going down. And Farrakhan, by God's grace, has pulled the cover off of that satanic Jew.
He has only a history of this kind of racism and anti-Semitism. Now, Tamika Mallory, she posted on Instagram about the event, and according to the Anti-Defamation League, Farrakhan actually gave Mallory a shout-out during this speech. Now, after intense backlash, Mallory is out with a statement where she apologizes to the various groups of people that Farrakhan routinely and viciously and hatefully attacks, but then she also defended her attendance. And she writes in part, quote, "I didn't expect my presence at Savior's Day to lead anyone to question my beliefs, especially considering that I have been going to this event regularly for over 30 years. And she continues, "Where my people are is where I must also be. I go into difficult spaces. I attend meetings with police and legislators and the very folks so much of my protest has been directed towards." This is an utterly ridiculous argument. Now, you can't attend Farrakhan events for over 30 years, like Mallory has just admitted, and then all of a sudden pretend to be surprised and learn that he spews vile, hateful, racist, and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Now, this is what the left does every single time. They hang these people out, the radical left-wingers, they hang out with them, and then either flat out deny their relationships or they just pretend like it just isn't a big deal. For example, let's look at how some of those 7 Democratic members of Congress are reacting to being exposed to having these ties to Farrakhan. Now, Congressman Keith Ellison, well, he told the Washington Post, "Oh, none of my colleagues ever asked me about that, only reporters. I'm telling you, no one cares." Pretty disgraceful. And this is the same Keith Ellison that accuses Republicans of being racist and for years has been trying to dodge and downplay allegations of anti-Semitism. And of course, Ellison, he's not alone. Back in February, Congressman Danny Davis told the Daily Caller he's not bothered by Farrakhan's position on, quote, the Jewish question. And Congressman Davis has previously told the Daily Caller that he thinks Farrakhan is a, quote, outstanding human being. And Danny is now changing his tune and denouncing Farrakhan. Now, we reached out to all 7 members of Congress for comment. They all ignored us except for Congressman Gregory Meeks. He directed us to a tweet where he condemns Farrakhan's anti-Semitic statement, but then goes on to attack President Trump. As for the other members of Congress, well, that are not denouncing their ties to Farrakhan, the Daily Caller is reporting that Maxine Waters, Barbara Lee, Andre Carson, Al Green have all attended meetings with Farrakhan while serving as members of Congress. And by the way, take a look at this. It's a stunning video that shows Maxine Waters, Barbara Lee, Al Green all hugging and shaking hands with, yes, the racist anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan. And according to the Daily Caller, this happened in 2006 during an event in New Orleans. Now, for years, these members of Congress have been able to maintain relationships with Farrakhan because most members of the media give them a pass. There's no accountability, no punishment for hanging out with hate-filled extremists. In fact, it's become a defining characteristic of the left, including former President Barack Obama. Now, we told you how Obama sat in the pews of the Reverend Wright's church, the Church of GD America, for over 20 years, how he launched his political career inside the living room of unrepentant domestic terrorists Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn. Given that information, this 2005 photo of Barack Obama grinning ear to ear with Louis Farrakhan, it shouldn't be a surprise. Now, the reason you never saw this before the election in 2008 is because the photographer who took the picture says he was pressured by the Congressional Black Caucus to keep it a secret. And the photographer also says that he thinks that this photo would have made a difference in the 2008 election. I believe he's right. This photo would have further exposed everything we were uncovering on this show about Barack Obama and his radical, rigid leftist beliefs and friends. We did reach out to Obama for comment about Farrakhan's comments. Not surprisingly, we didn't hear back from his spokesman. And here's the most important question about this. If Farrakhan isn't that bad of a guy, like several Democrats are claiming, then why is it necessary to hide a photo of him with Obama? Maybe it's because Democrats didn't want you to be reminded of Farrakhan and his history of hate. This is just a small sampling. Take a look.
Here the Jews don't like Farrakhan, so they call me Hitler. Well, that's a good name. Hitler was a very great man. There were many Israelis and Zionist Jews in key roles in the 9/11 attacks. Because you see, white people deserve to die. That's right. And they know. So they think it's us coming to do it. There is no human being on earth that has murdered more living things than the Caucasian. He's a murderer and a liar.
Then soon we're going to sit at a table and talk about retired. We want some of this earth. Or we'll tear this goddamn country up.
And coming up, the left cannot seem to understand why the Roseanne reboot has been so successful.
First, I'm Alicia Acuna. Josh Holt and his family just arriving home in Utah after spending nearly 2 years in a Venezuelan prison. The 26-year-old former LDS missionary and his wife Tammy were freed Saturday after months of negotiations between the U.S. and Venezuelan governments. After their release, the Holts were flown to Washington, D.C. for a meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office. Now the couple and their children will make their way to Riverton, Utah for a homecoming celebration. A moving tradition today at Arlington National Cemetery, the final resting place for thousands of American war heroes. The president laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Similar ceremonies were observed across our nation as we pause to honor the men and women who died fighting for our freedom. I'm Alicia Acuna. Now back to Sean Hannity.
Jackie thinks every girl should grow up and be president, even if they're a liar, liar, pantsuit on fire.
I think we know who's a liar and who's on fire, Roseanne.
And welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. The left can't seem to understand why the Roseanne Barr reboot has been so successful. Well, I broke it down in this mini monologue. Take a look. So the Roseanne reboot is taking the country by storm. It has been a massive rating success in the first 2 weeks it's been on air. And by the way, it's rattling the left. Take a look.
I should have tried to understand why you voted the crazy way that you did.
And I should have understood that, you want the government to give everybody free health care because you're a good-hearted person who can't do simple math.
Well, people parent differently than they did in your day. Turns out a lot of what you did not work, and some of it was against the law.
Yeah, it's against the law because your generation made everything so PC. Instead of spanking them, you tell them to go over there and think about what they did wrong. You know what they're thinking? I can't believe this loser isn't spanking me.
The Roseanne reboot continues to score huge in ratings, which, of course, is rattling the left, since Roseanne Barr is an outspoken supporter of President Trump. She responded to her critics last night. This is priceless. In an interview with Jimmy Fallon, watch this.
But then also with the big hit comes people that aren't so happy as well. If you say that you're a supporter of Donald Trump or...
Oh, yeah, people are mad about that.
Yeah.
But, I don't give a Well, everybody had to choose for themselves, according to their own conscience, who they thought was the lesser of two evils. Everybody chose that, so I'm not going to put anybody down who didn't vote like me. This is America. It's a free country, and, when you weigh it all together, I just felt like we needed a whole new thing, all the way, bottom to top.
And Kanye West also took a lot of heat from liberals for his support of the president and for saying that he likes conservative Candace Owens and how she thinks. We addressed that as well. It is a new political landscape in America. Famed rapper, fashion designer Kanye West has now issued a very glowing endorsement of President Trump. He took to Twitter, telling his millions of Twitter followers, quote, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him." Now, we are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. Well, that's what makes us individuals. And we have the right to independent thought. And Kanye West even posted a picture of himself wearing a Make America Great Again hat, driving liberals on social media totally insane tonight. And get this, Kanye's even slamming former President Obama for his utter failure in the former president's own hometown of Chicago, writing, quote, "Obama was in office for 8 years and nothing in Chicago changed." Now, Kanye West is absolutely right. We talked about this a lot. Under the Obama administration, nearly 4,000 people were murdered on the streets of Chicago, his hometown. Obama barely mentioned it did nothing. This was American lives, American treasure lost, tragedy, travesty. And of course, this all started after Kanye West publicly stood up for a black conservative, a woman that we had on the program this week, Candace Owens, after many on the left slammed her remarks at UCLA. Take a look at this.
What is happening right now in the black community, you're going to hear it in this room first. There's an ideological civil war happening. Black people that are focused on their past and shouting about slavery, and black people that are focused on their futures. Victim mentality is not cool. I don't know why people like being oppressed. It's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I love oppression. We're oppressed. 400 years of slavery, Jim Crow, which, by the way, none of you guys lived through. Your grandparents did, and it's embarrassing that you utilize their history. You utilize their history, and you come in here with more emotion than they ever had when they were living through it. More emotion than they ever had when they were living through it. It's embarrassing. You're not living through anything right now. You're overly privileged Americans.
Amazing moment. Star is born. And while Kanye West takes a stand for freedom of thought and freedom of expression, we should all support this. The left continues to also viciously go after Kanye West for his support of President Trump. Earlier, in an absolutely wild interview with TMZ on our friend Harvey Levin, while West defended his praise for President Trump, took shots at the liberal group, some of the liberal groups out there in the media. Here's some of it.
It's the mob. The mob tries to tell you what to think. The mob tries to make all blacks be Democrats for food stamps and stuff. I've never been into politics. I just love Trump. That's my boy. It's like the media and the liberals and the echo chamber and all that is having the most sore